And I will be and surrender myself to your will because you know best. And you know what is needed in this process. And if I truly believe, then all things will work together for good for those who love God. And so ultimately, this will be a blessing. Now, of course, going home and telling her betrothed perhaps wasn't the best of blessings. You know, poor old Joseph, who was betrothed to be married to Mary, not yet married, suddenly has to receive this news. And here we have Joseph, you know, who hoped to, I'm sure, live that conventional life, had good standing in his own community, now suddenly is aware that he has to take an unmarried woman who's pregnant as his wife. Well, in that culture, that was not the best of times. But the reality is that both Mary and Joseph saw it as an opportunity to be surprised with awe and wonder of just what God would do with this story. What would be the miraculous hand of God that would change these circumstances from uncertainty to certainty, from shock to praising God? How many of us have been in situations like that in our own lives where we have seen on the surface that everything looks as if it is an absolute mess? Everything looks as if it's absolute chaos. That people come along and they say, you know, well, praise the Lord Jesus. And the last thing you want to do is praise the Lord Jesus. Because the circumstances in our own lives look as if everything is just chaos. And yet how many of us in our conversations with friends have been able to see the silver lining of every problem or every concern or every circumstance or every disaster that has happened in our lives? The silver lining that we get to see that things are half full, not half empty. The silver lining that calls us to embrace things with good news and with the anticipation, with the awe and wonder of what God is going to do with the situations that we find ourselves in. One of the great things that I've seen about some of the situations that many of us have found ourselves in recently is that we found out who our true church friends are. We found out who are the people who will really walk through the crises of life with me. Who are the fair-weathered friends? Yeah? Anybody ever had fair-weathered friends? You know, those friends that will only ever be with you when you're Mr. Positive or Ms. Positive. But those friends that will stick with you through thick and through thin. It's been exciting to watch that happen in this congregation as we've moved into a new era of our life together. The way in which we are really being called to reach out in new ways and in different ways. Well, Mary was being called to go with God through thick and through thin. Through all the uncertainties of what her life would be. I'm sure that she thought that Joseph perhaps would abandon her. Didn't think that Joseph would perhaps stick with her through thick and thin. Didn't think that Joseph would perhaps give up the status that he had in amongst his own community and to stick with Mary through it all. Now, unfortunately, we don't know what happened to Joseph after Jesus was about 3 or 4. We don't know much about Joseph after that. But we do know that in this story, Joseph stood with Mary and journeyed with her through the pregnancy, through the arrival of the child, and became the earthly father to Jesus the Christ, to see with awe and wonder what God was able to do. As we light our Mary candle, we remember Mary. We remember how she allowed her life through all the uncertainties to yield it open to the new possibilities of what God would do. And today in our own church, in our own community, we're very much in that place. That's not to say we're Mary, although I'm sure some of us would claim that name. I was told I can claim Mary this morning. But because we all live with uncertainty. And yet, when we look back at other opportunities in our lives, other times of uncertainty in our lives, other times when we thought that God must have abandoned us, other times when we must have thought that God somehow was angry with us, other times in our lives when we've gone through stress and strain, how many of us can see in hindsight the footsteps of God going through those parts of our lives? Oh, it's good to see some hands go up. You see, we're living testimony to the awe and wonder of the transforming power of God that can take any situation and help us to find a way through if we remain faithful. You see, that's the big part of this equation, is we're called to be faithful in the good and the not so good. To be faithful in all circumstances. Mary was faithful in all circumstances. I wonder what it would have been like if Mary had said, no, I don't want this. Mary, I don't want this burden. Now, the angel Gabriel probably could have, she was, he or she or the angel Gabriel was powerful enough to do all things. So I wonder what it would have been like if Mary had said, no, I'm not having this. I just want conventional life. I just want to go and marry Joseph and live happily ever after with no drama in my life. Oh, wouldn't we all like that? I just want a peaceful life. I'm sure there would have been another Mary that the angel Gabriel would have visited. But the fact of the matter is that Mary yielded her life open to every opportunity, every possibility. The good and the not so good. The tough decisions and the not so tough decisions. And to yield that life open as a living vessel. 2,000 years later, we're invited to do the same. To allow our lives in the good and the not so good, in the moments of crisis. I know that I've said this before and I'll say it again, but in our church office, we receive phone call after phone call after phone call from folks in our own community and outside our own community who are struggling right at this very moment. They're not looking forward to Christmas, or they're trying to make the best of the opportunity and what it might look like. One of the reasons, I'll just be honest with you, one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure that this house looked as pretty as possible for Christmas, and I think we've done a pretty good job. But one of the reasons why I want to make this house the prettiest that we possibly could do this Christmas was to inspire some awe and wonder in us. To give us a place where we can feel proud of, even in the midst of what's going on in the world. A place where we can feel first-class citizens and not second-class citizens. A place where we don't need to worry, but a place where we can come and free ourselves, even if it's just for an hour and a half, but to free ourselves from what might be going on elsewhere in our lives. Not to hide it, not to pretend it's not happening, to confront it and to talk about it, but to do it in such a way that we can feel proud about who we are. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted this place to look so pretty this Christmas. In all of the circumstances of life, we're being called to surrender ourselves, even in the tough times of our lives. Even in the tough decisions that we have to make just to make ourselves through. But sisters and brothers, just like Mary and Joseph and Elizabeth and Zechariah, just like all of those who came before us, if we remain faithful to what we believe and faithful to what we know and faithful to what some of us have experienced by looking back in our lives, we will make it through. We will get to the other side. We will get to the place where we can look back on all of these situations and says, okay, what did that teach us? Now it says something I think it teaches us quite quickly. There's too much greed in the world. There's too much of the people who want to just take, and not enough people who want to give back into the world. One of the things I think has already taught many of us is that the more we give, the more we receive in our lives. And it's been such a blessing to watch even those who are struggling with their own sets of circumstances. Those same people are the ones who are reaching out and saying, I can do that. They're the same ones that are reaching out and saying, come with me and I'll cook you a meal.